Two's company. 3 is a murder in the making. A Navy wife's lust for men and money leads to troubled waters.
People can become addicted to many things. Spending is one of them.
A gifted teacher can't make her married lover behave.
She knew nothing of love and relationships.
And a rural matriarch spices up country life with an illicit affair.
She saw him as being a means to an end.
Can you pass me the wrench out of the box?
Up-and-coming officer, 29-year-old Corey Voss, is as dedicated to his young family as he is to the Navy.
He was a very good father. Neighbors and friends would see him outside playing with his kids all the time.
Okay, you kids, dinner.
5 more minutes.
Listen to your mother. Go on.
In 2006, he's building a good life in Newport News, Virginia, together with bubbly wife, 30-year-old Katerina "Kat" Voss.
Neighbors, friends all say, wow, what a great couple. You know, they're living the American dream. Corey is this consummate, great husband. He gives her this wonderful suburban life.
Oh, she didn't have to go.
I don't want you moping around while I'm not here. Go ahead and have some fun.
But life as a Navy wife
Be no fun without you.
has its downside. When her husband is deployed at sea, Kat's left home alone. And Kat doesn't like being alone.
She always had an overwhelming desire for attention. She had to be the center of attention. She was always trying to be noticed.
When there's not a man around in her life, Kat needs to find one.
From the time Kat was a teenager, she always had a boyfriend or a husband. She was never without a man paying attention to her, and she liked that.
All right, that's enough. Get to bed now. I told you.
Sometimes she would drug her children so that they would be asleep. She would leave them alone and go out, party, drink, bring home a guy.
You know, when Corey went out to sea, it was party time.
Extramarital sex isn't her only vice. Kat can hide her affairs from Corey, but when it comes to spending money, she's out of control.
Okay, the green or the blue?
Kat, we missed the mortgage payment.
The blue really makes my eyes pop, don't you think?
People can become addicted to many things. Spending is one of them.
Babe, you gotta stop spending.
I never spend anything.
I think she saw money as an avenue to get the attention that she craved.
People in the military don't make great salaries for what they do, but it's certainly not a bad living. It was for Kat. There was never enough.
It's got to stop.
It will. I promise.
Kat bought fancy clothes, expensive jewelry, and it didn't matter that her husband couldn't pay the bills.
For Kat, nothing was ever enough. She'd always want more, more, more. Ultimately, someone like this implodes.
7 years into the marriage, Kat knows Corey can never give her what she desires. She looks elsewhere.
What are you looking at?
You.
Corey goes out on a 6-month leave.
Such a cheeky girl.
So she meets this dude named Michael Draven.
Why do you have to go?
I'm a busy man. I got things to do.
26-year-old Michael Draven isn't rich, but he's not without resources. He's a petty criminal, and that makes him the perfect man.
She saw him as an opportunity. He was a person who was manipulated by Cat Voss. She controlled him, and she knew how to control him.
When's her husband coming home?
I hope never.
Cat portrays herself as a victim.
What do you mean?
He's a monster.
Does he hate you?
Yeah. And the children.
She begins working on Michael, saying, Corey is abusive, he beats me, he hits the children, and she begins to ply him with this. It's almost like she wants to build up Corey and demonize him into this monster.
I'm gonna take care of it. I'm gonna take care of you.
A Navy salary only goes so far. A Navy pension is forever.
He had a $400,000 life insurance policy, and Cat would have guaranteed income from his military pay as long as the children needed it.
Katerina Voss wants to cash in her husband's Navy pension, but she needs to kill him first. With the help of lover, Michael Draven.
Cat was able to convince Michael, but they didn't want to actually do the deed themselves. So Michael went looking for a killer.
Hey, David.
Hey, I'm Cat.
36-year-old David Runyon knows guns, and he's willing to do anything for money.
David Runyon grew up in a military family. He never could hold a job. Every job that he had didn't last very long.
They had set a price tag of $20,000. They basically recruited him to be the hitman.
And what we were thinking is that we would send my husband out here around 11 p.m. on Tuesday.
Cat doesn't leave anything to chance. She plans every last detail.
They draw a little map, directions to the house, you know, the times that Corey's around, he's not around.
Gloves, boots, military-style pants, black hoodie.
They even provide David with a shopping list of what he needs, including the gun. Basically, they give this guy a blueprint for murder.
Newport News, Virginia. On April 29th, 2007, Cat treats husband Corey to a romantic dinner. This is no ordinary meal.
Cat's lively and generous manner was a put-on. The real Cat was about to surface.
Tonight, there'll be no dessert.
Babe, I'll do this. I need you to do me a favor.
Sure.
I need you to get me some cash for the kids' school lunches tomorrow.
Can you run to the ATM and get me some cash?
I'll make it worth your while.
Okay.
Sure. Corey's feeling good. Romantic dinner. His wife is loving him. No problem. Jumps in his car, heads to the ATM.
Hello?
Hey, he's on his way.
I'm right here, ready to go.
Tonight is Corey's last supper.
They developed a plan to kill Corey late at night when he was at an ATM machine, and they thought it would look like a botched robbery.
but he can't even get into the account because Kat had given him the wrong PIN number.
Hello?
Babe, I think maybe you gave me the wrong PIN.
Oh, I must have given you the wrong card.
So he's standing there for maybe 5 minutes, which is just enough time for David Runyon, dressed in all black, to sneak into the back seat of Corey's vehicle, and Corey doesn't see him.
David shot Corey 5 times,
including fatal shots to the chest and abdomen.
A dedicated family man's life is wasted for greed.
When he would come back from deployment, he didn't see his friends. He just wanted to be with his family and his kids. Corey wasn't the only victim of this crime. So were his 2 children.
The crime scene indicates a violent robbery. But as the police start investigating, Kat is moving on.
Oh, here we go.
French champagne.
Only a couple of days after Corey is pronounced dead, the benefits from the military come in, $100,000.
To the good life.
And our next vacation.
Oh, yes, you guys should come.
Kat immediately spent that money in a fashion that is hard to describe.
Within 3 months, she only had $900 left.
Living large isn't evidence of murder, but the police are suspicious of her new boyfriend. And they discover he spent time in jail shortly before Corey's death.
It was a game changer. It was the biggest step in the case.
The police obtain the tapes of all Michael's phone calls behind bars.
Hello?
Hey, babe.
Hey, how are you coping?
Okay. Miss you.
I miss you too.
There is no privacy in jail or prison. Everything you say can be recorded if you're talking on a phone. And that opened a lot of doors.
You said you and David was talking?
Uh-huh.
You told him what's going on?
Yes, I did. That's right.
We were able to identify an individual by the name of David Runyon that had made contact with both Kat Voss and Michael Draven.
A search warrant for David Runyon's property is a jackpot for investigators.
We had practically every piece of evidence that we could have imagined.
And in the console of his vehicle was this map. Hand scrawled on it was the references to Corey, 97 Ford pickup truck, missing hubcap, tailgate down.
He leaves a blueprint for murder in the car.
In 2009, Michael Draven and David Runyon are convicted of conspiracy to commit murder, carjacking, and murder with a firearm. Michael is sentenced to 2 life terms. David is sentenced to death and is awaiting appeal on death row.
Kat Voss is absolutely a manipulative person. She sacrificed her husband, her children, and both her and her husband's families for the desire for money.
Katerina Voss pleads guilty in 2008. She is sentenced to 4 life terms plus 20 years.
The only remorse that she has is that she got caught.
Kat's desire for wealth and attention endangered the one person who gave it freely, as she reduced Corey's life to a mere obstacle. She could only see the goal.
If Kat had not been caught and put in prison for the rest of her life, killing husbands might have become a habit. Love triangles are dangerous for everyone involved in the triangle. And when there's a gun in the room, someone's gonna get killed.
1914, Waukesha, Wisconsin. The new teacher in town, 36-year-old Grace Lusk, is not a woman of her time.
Dr. Roberts is quite an illustrious veterinarian.
Really? Just the man I've been looking for, then.
Is that so?
Her career was very important to her, which was really unusual in those days for women.
Yeah, I'm a teacher. I just started teaching agriculture.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to teach you a thing or two.
By the time she was in her 30s, she acquired a degree in philosophy and medieval history.
We must have you out to the farm one day.
That would be amazing.
3 languages, Latin, French, and German.
She's really, really sharp, really sharp.
It's clear to Mary Roberts that the younger scholar turns her husband's head. But all Grace can see in the 49-year-old veterinarian, David Roberts, is a career opportunity.
Grace was very knowledgeable in many areas that she taught, but agriculture was the one area that she struggled with.
Now that you're in the country, we'll have to get you on a horse.
That sounds great.
He's a veterinarian, he's a cattle breeder of some renown. She realizes right away, this is my ticket to understanding agriculture. So she engages him in conversation, and he's quite happy to talk about his work.
We have quite the farm out there, mostly Galloway.
It's a meeting of minds that sparks a very decent proposal.
You see, I'm writing a book about the cattle, and I need a secretary. A proofreader. You could work for me.
He asked her if she would help him write a book, write his next book.
Really?
He suggests sort of a quid pro quo. If she'll assist him, then he'll, fill her in on the stuff she needs to know in order to teach agriculture. So it's a good arrangement for both of them.
The scholar and the doctor meet once a week for over a year.
Shouldn't this paragraph be in the present tense?
Eventually, the inevitable happens.
Dr. Roberts.
And then Cupid showed up and shot his arrow.
Grace.
You're married.
Dr. Roberts repeatedly tried to win her over and to seduce her.
A modern woman in every other way, Grace stumbles at adultery.
There's no love in my marriage.
He said, my wife no longer cares for me, and it's not a marriage anymore, and it's basically a loveless marriage.
Grace finally justified her getting involved with him. She sort of invalidated the marriage in her mind.
It wasn't long before they were involved in a torrid love affair that involved trips out of town, expensive dinners, nice hotels, theater. It must have been dizzying for Grace to be treated this way.
At last.
He would leave his wife. He said it was a loveless marriage, and he wanted to be with Grace.
I think what Dr. Roberts spotted in Grace was a lonely woman. And he moved in on that. He took advantage of her. But she willingly played the game too.
But as months turn into years, the good doctor reneges on his promises. He has no intention of telling his wife about his affair.
Grace was getting a little desperate.
She was getting so distraught, she contemplated suicide. She even sat down and penned a letter to Mary, David's wife, telling, all about the affair. Didn't you notice that he'd cooled toward you?
A broken heart has the accomplished Grace acting like a schoolgirl.
It's Grace's naivete, I think, that just clouds everything for her.
Grace.
Take the Bible, David.
Grace gives David an ultimatum.
She pulled out her pistol and at gunpoint forced him to put his hand on the Bible.
No, swear. You will tell Mary the truth.
I swear.
And swear that he would tell his wife and that they would separate.
After we returned from Boston.
What Grace didn't seem to understand is when you get a promise of, I will love you forever, and there's a gun being pointed at you, what good is that?
The situation is diffused, but no one is winning the fight.
Dr. Roberts did not understand that basically Grace was TNT that now had a lit fuse.
After a 3-year illicit affair, 39-year-old Grace Lusk still believes her lover, David Roberts, wants to leave his wife.
David, I have to see you. No, David.
But on June 21st, 1917,
stay away from my husband.
His wife, Mary, confronts Grace.
He doesn't love you.
And tells a different story.
I'll have you dropped out of town.
He loves me. I have his love letters.
Liar.
Grace said, no, he cares for me. What you don't understand, he loves me, and I have letters to prove it.
He's mine.
With 2 shots, Mary Roberts is fatally wounded. Fighting for her marriage, she pays with her life.
I don't think Mary expected that it was going to result in her death.
I don't think Mary knew who she was dealing with.
For Grace, her rival is gone, but the pain remains.
Grace then turned the gun on herself and shot herself in the chest.
But it's not the end of Grace.
The bullet passed through her and went out the other side and didn't cause any major injury. She missed all her vital organs.
David arrives to a tragic scene of his own making, but he doesn't assist. He runs away.
David sees Mary down. She's been shot. Grace is bleeding. David decides this is a good time for him to go and get help.
It's a confusing scene.
Did she shoot you?
No. I shot her. And then myself. Less successfully.
And Grace isn't finished.
Stay back.
Grace, still distraught and highly emotional, holds them off for about 45 minutes.
He was trying to disarm her, alleviate the situation.
Where's my heart?
And then she said, my heart, where's my heart?
Here.
Grace misses her heart and survives yet another point-blank gunshot.
She was being dramatic.
That's questionable. Did she really intend to kill herself or not? But she certainly made a good show of it.
Grace Lusk makes a full recovery. In 1918, she is convicted of the murder of Mary Roberts and sentenced to 19 years in prison. But she serves only 3.
Her sentence was commuted, and then she received an official pardon.
That was not an unusual thing in those days. People in their hearts didn't believe a woman could kill. It was easy for people to say, well, it really was Dr. Roberts' fault and not hers. He lied to her, he did all these things, he cheated on his wife. He's the one that should be in prison.
David doesn't escape jail time. Convicted of adultery, he serves the maximum sentence of 1 year. Grace was not his first affair.
If this case were to happen today, I can't see the same result. The social restrictions contributed certainly to the murder.
With all of Grace's intelligence and education, in a battle of self-control, raw emotion won and turned her into a killer.
Grace was a pioneer for her education, for her accomplishments, but the one thing she didn't know anything about is the one thing that destroyed her life. Grace was not experienced in the ways of the world. She was trusting, she was lonely, and she fell in love. And the combination was toxic. Sometimes behavior is motivated by jealousy, but most of the time it's motivated by money. She wanted more, much more.
In Hertfordshire, England, wealthy farmer's wife, 47-year-old Angela Taylor, is a long way from her poor childhood. Her life completely changes when she marries millionaire farmer Bill.
Bill was worth tens of millions of pounds.
But after 18 years of marriage and 3 children to 67-year-old Bill, she's had enough.
Bill was always an old-fashioned working farmer. He would be out of the house for much of the day. She was left on her own with the children.
Richard's got a great idea for expanding the business.
Not interested.
What's up?
Everything.
Angela married for money. When you marry for money, you earn every penny.
I want out.
What do you mean?
I want a divorce.
This farmer's wife wants a new life, away from her husband and stepson, 40-year-old Richard.
Bill's son from his first marriage. Richard wasn't happy about the relationship and didn't even attend their wedding.
But why?
Why? Why?
Angela, I love you.
There's no doubt that he was deeply distressed at this.
Under UK law, unless both parties agree to a divorce, they must be separated for 5 years.
He was going to make her wait the full 5 years. That was obviously enormously frustrating for Angela.
To keep her close, Bill gives her some of his fortune.
Angela, you home?
Yeah.
2 farms worth $1 million. For any more, she'll have to wait years.
Didn't expect to see you here today.
Thought I could take the kids out for a meal.
Sorry, they're gone.
Bill thinks it gives him time to win her back.
I don't suppose you'd like to go out for a meal?
No, thank you.
Right.
Bill wanted Angela back very much, but she was so over Bill.
Whose boots are they?
Oh, they're Paul's. He's using the bathroom.
All right, boss. Thanks, Ange. Better get back to it.
In fact, she had a new boyfriend, and he was a farm laborer at Bill's farm.
Angela keeps her true relationship with 53-year-old Paul Cannon under wraps.
He's a good worker.
Poor thing.
But not to save Bill's feelings.
Oh, he's got nowhere to live.
Right.
It's all part of a long game.
Angela still had access to Bill's affairs. She still had access to his bank account.
As long as Bill loves her, Angela knows there's money to make. His son smells a rat.
Look at this.
Richard was obviously concerned that Angela was trying to get more and more of his father's money and property and land.
What do you want me to do?
Confront her.
I suspect that was Angela trying to manipulate Bill to give her anything she wanted.
Son, I'm trying to win her back.
She's trying to drive us broke. Think about it.
Even her lover, Paul, has a part to play.
How about a beer?
At Angela's suggestion, Paul moved into Bill's house. So Bill, the generous soul that he was, allowed Paul to live there rent-free.
Everything okay? Yes. Cheers.
Of course, he didn't know that Paul was Angela's lover. Paul was sent there to spy on Bill.
In the game of Angela versus Bill, Angela thinks she's making ground, as long as her star player is happy.
She did have feelings of affection for Paul Cannon, but I think she also saw him as being a means to an end.
He didn't know she was playing him too.
Angela wants Paul to be game ready because in this small rural community,
Bill, I've got something to tell you.
affairs don't stay secret for long.
What?
Angela's been having an affair.
Everybody knew everything. Plus, Paul was telling people that he was involved with Angela.
Who is it?
That chap who's been working for you.
Paul?
Yes, I think that's his name.
When Bill first discovered that there was a relationship between Paul Cannon and Angela, he went up to Paul and confronted him.
Stay away from my wife. How about you put up or shut up?
Cannon's response was to threaten Bill Taylor, quite seriously.
That was pretty much the beginning of the end.
In 2018, in rural Hertfordshire, England, Bill Taylor discovers his estranged wife, Angela, has a lover. But he still won't divorce her. In May, Angela and her new man, Paul Cannon, go to war.
On the 26th or the 27th of May, Angela sent a message to Paul saying, "Darling, if you're bored, go and scare him." Paul Cannon went in the dead of night and set fire to Bill's Land Rover.
Paul Cannon had become completely besotted with her, and she did have him dancing to her tune.
Angela wasn't going to give up trying to kick Bill as far away as she could.
Dad, are you okay?
Yes.
Bill never gives up hope.
We'll be okay.
But his son can see it's a losing battle.
Bill was in a bad way. He could see that there was little, if any, prospect of a reconciliation with Angela. He wasn't looking after himself properly. He wasn't eating properly.
8 days later, Bill goes missing. His son is suspicious and goes to the police. When they investigate the recent fire, their suspicions are confirmed.
DNA from a towel and from a shirt matched Paul. He'd used diesel to start the fire, which didn't burn as he would have hoped, as petrol would have done.
And when Angela and Paul's affair is revealed, a missing persons case becomes a murder investigation.
This is ridiculous. You should be looking at the sun.
Save it for the station.
Detectives love people having illicit affairs. They do stupid things and make the detective's life easier.
The police soon
tells Angela, "I've just been watching Kill Bill 2, LOL." Angela replies, "Just one would be nice."
Angela and Paul were charged with murder. Bill's body hadn't been found. However, the police didn't have a little bit of circumstantial evidence, they had a mountain of it.
Then the final proof. Bill's body is found slumped in river mud just outside his farm. 8 months after his disappearance, and 1 day before his killers stand trial. The police piece together how Bill is murdered.
Bill may have been lured outside in the middle of the night and was involved in some sort of confrontation on his own property before he was taken away and killed. He was not wearing an arthritis bracelet that he always had on him. Links from the bracelet were found at the farm, indicating that there had been some sort of struggle.
But there was this minor damage to this bone in his neck that one often sees in cases of strangulation.
The police now have everything they need to bring charges against Angela as the mastermind and Paul as her executioner.
He would do anything for her. Her actions reveal what a calculated, manipulative person she was.
It's a side of Angela her husband never saw until it was too late.
Even for all the bad things Angela had done and all the hurt she caused, Bill still loved her and wanted her back.
In 2019, both Angela Taylor and Paul Cannon are convicted of murder and arson. They are sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 22 years.
As between Angela Taylor and Paul Cannon, I think the driving force in the relationship was her.
The men in Angela's life are a means to an end until they're no longer useful.
Bill was the only person in danger from Angela when they were married, but I think eventually she would have turned on Paul. They were partners in murder, and he had a big mouth, so she probably would have eventually killed him. Fortunately, they're both in prison.
These deadly women decided to remove the third wheel.
The last train of the night was already pulling away when the scream echoed through the tunnel, swallowed by steel and motion, leaving behind only a question that would haunt New York for decades. How does someone vanish in the middle of a city that never stops watching? It was a Tuesday, ordinary, forgettable, the kind of night commuters erase from memory as soon as their Metro card beeps them through the turnstile. But somewhere between the flicker of fluorescent lights and the thunder of rails, a life fractured, and the subway kept moving as if nothing had happened. This is where the cold case begins, underground, where sound travels strangely and shadows seem to lean in closer, where millions pass through each day without ever really seeing one another. The station sat beneath Lower Manhattan, all concrete and grime, posters peeling at the corners, the smell of metal and damp air clinging to coats and scarves. Surveillance cameras blinked red, tired eyes watching everything and nothing. At 11:47 p.m., a young woman stepped onto the platform alone. Her name was Lena Morales, 26 years old, a graphic designer finishing late hours, known to friends for her punctual texts and careful routines. She never missed her train. She never took shortcuts. That night, she never made it home. Witnesses would later say they saw her standing near the edge, scrolling on her phone, backpack slung over one shoulder, just another silhouette among many. And then in a city of constant motion she was gone. When police arrived, the platform was already back to normal, commuters brushing past yellow tape with practiced indifference, annoyed at the delay, unaware they were stepping through the opening moments of a mystery that would ripple outward, shocking a family, unsettling a neighborhood, and eventually earning a label that carries its own weight. New York subway cold case. Officers searched the tracks first, expecting the obvious, but there was no body, no blood, no sign of an accident. Transit workers shut down the line, flashlights slicing through darkness, finding only discarded newspapers and the endless black stretch of tunnel. Lena had vanished between trains, between camera angles, between assumptions. The first hours were frantic, driven by the belief that quick answers were still possible. Detectives canvassed the station, pulling grainy footage from security cameras that stuttered and skipped at crucial moments. On one monitor, Lena appears clearly, stepping onto the platform. On the next, she's gone, as if edited out of her own life. No one is seen grabbing her. No struggle is visible. The footage becomes the most replayed 30 seconds in the precinct, detectives leaning in, rewinding, pointing at shadows, at blurs, at anything that could be a clue. This is where theories begin to multiply, where certainty dissolves into speculation. Her phone last pinged near the station, then fell silent. Her bank cards went untouched. No one answered when officers knocked on doors at 3 a.m., flashing badges in hallways heavy with sleep. By morning, Lena's face was on the news, her smile frozen in a photo pulled from social media. A lower third graphic reading, "Mysterious subway disappearance shocks community." Reporters gathered outside the station entrance, microphones thrust forward, asking questions no one could answer. How does someone disappear on a crowded platform? How do cameras miss it? How safe is the subway, really? The community responded with the familiar rhythm of shock and solidarity. Candles lined the station walls. Flyers multiplied on lampposts and coffee shop windows, her name printed in bold letters, a phone number beneath it. Friends retraced her steps, riding the same train, standing in the same spot, trying to feel what she felt in her final known moments. Her mother sat in the family apartment, surrounded by detectives and paperwork, insisting that Lena would never just leave, that something terrible had happened, that the city had swallowed her whole. As days turned into weeks, the investigation slowed, then stalled. Tips flooded in at first, each one carrying hope, each one collapsing under scrutiny. A man who looked like her was seen in Queens. A woman matching her description boarded a bus in New Jersey. None of it held. The subway became both crime scene and accomplice, its noise erasing sound, its crowds providing cover, its endless tunnels offering too many places for a secret to hide. Detectives began to speak in quieter tones, using words like unlikely and no evidence, preparing the family for a truth no one wanted to accept. Then came the strange details, the ones that refused to fit neatly into reports. A transit worker recalled hearing an argument near the platform that night, but couldn't describe the voices. A maintenance log showed a brief power fluctuation minutes before Lena vanished, plunging part of the station into darkness just long enough for cameras to glitch. A witness remembered a man in a dark coat standing too close, but couldn't pick him out of a lineup. Each detail hovered at the edge of meaning, tantalizing, insufficient, the kind of clues that haunt cold cases, promising everything and delivering nothing. Months passed. Seasons changed. The candles melted away. Flyers faded, then disappeared. The case file grew thicker even as momentum died. Detectives were reassigned. New crimes demanded attention. Lena's name slipped from headlines, replaced by fresher tragedies. This is how cold cases are born, not in a single moment of failure, but in a slow accumulation of unanswered questions, in the quiet decision to move on while something unresolved remains buried beneath the noise. For years, the subway station kept operating, trains roaring through the space where Lena was last seen, commuters unaware they were passing through the epicenter of an unsolved mystery. Sometimes a new detective would pull the file, flip through the pages, watch the footage again, feel that familiar frustration. How could someone disappear without a trace? Was it an accident expertly hidden, a crime perfectly timed, or something no one had considered? The file would return to the shelf, marked unresolved, another New York subway cold case gathering dust. Lena's family never stopped pushing. Anniversaries became rituals of grief and defiance. Press conferences held on the same platform. Her mother's voice steady as she demanded answers from a city that had none to give. Each year, the story resurfaced briefly, a reminder of unfinished business, before sinking back into obscurity. The city learned to live with the unanswered question, but it never fully forgot. There is something uniquely unsettling about a disappearance in plain sight, about a crime without a scene, about a mystery that unfolds in a place designed to move people along, not leave them behind. And then, long after hope had thinned to a fragile thread, something shifted. But that moment, the one that would send shockwaves through the city, the one hinted at in headlines and whispered among investigators, was still ahead. For now, all that exists is the echo of a scream, the flicker of a camera, and a woman who stepped onto a platform and never came back, leaving New York with a question it has been asking ever since, deep underground, every time the doors slide shut and the train disappears into the dark. The file came back to life quietly, without ceremony, pulled from a shelf by hands that had learned not to expect miracles, and yet the moment it was opened, the room seemed to tighten, as if the air itself remembered what had been buried. Lena Morales, missing, presumed victim, New York subway cold case, unresolved. The pages smelled faintly of dust and stale coffee, margins crowded with notes written by people who had since retired, transferred, or stopped believing this case would ever speak again. But cold cases don't wake up on their own. They are disturbed, shaken loose by something new, something that doesn't fit, and this time the disturbance came from a place no one had been looking. It started with an arrest that had nothing to do with Lena, at least not on the surface. A routine pickup in Brooklyn, a man detained on an unrelated assault charge, fingerprinted, processed, fed into a system that never forgets even when people do. His name barely registered at first, just another line in a database, until an alert flashed, quiet but insistent, a partial match pinging against evidence logged years earlier and then ignored. A smudge lifted from a subway turnstile, too degraded to matter back then, suddenly aligned with a living, breathing suspect. Not a full match, not enough for warrants or headlines, but enough to make a detective pause, enough to reopen a door long sealed. The man was in his early 40s now, older, heavier than the shadowy figure described by witnesses years ago. His record a patchwork of small crimes, nothing spectacular, nothing that would have drawn attention at the time of Lena's disappearance. He lived alone, moved often, worked jobs that left no trace, the kind of person cities absorb without noticing. When detectives sat across from him in a fluorescent-lit room, his eyes were calm, almost bored, as if he'd been here before in other lives, other versions of himself. He denied knowing Lena, denied being at that station, denied everything with a practiced ease that felt rehearsed. As investigators dug deeper, the city's forgotten details began to resurface. Transit logs were re-examined, old power reports scrutinized with fresh skepticism. That brief outage on the platform, once dismissed as a routine glitch, now felt deliberate, its timing too perfect, its duration just long enough to blind cameras and witnesses alike. Engineers were called in, asked questions no one had thought to ask years ago. Could someone trigger it? Could it be exploited? The answers were cautious, technical, unsettling. It wouldn't have been easy, they said, but it wouldn't have been impossible either. Witness statements were pulled from archives, voices recorded long ago crackling through speakers. The maintenance worker's memory of raised voices gained weight. The woman who recalled a man in a dark coat now sketching his face again, her hands shaking as she admitted she'd always wondered if she should have said more. Time had softened some details, sharpened others, guilt seeping into recollection. Memory is unreliable, detectives know this, but patterns still emerge when you lay enough fragments side by side. A man lingering too close. A moment of darkness. A scream swallowed by steel. The suspect's movements on the night Lena vanished were reconstructed piece by piece. Cell tower data placed him in Lower Manhattan. A Metro card registered entries and exits that aligned uncomfortably well with the timeline. He claimed coincidence, bad luck, the kind of statistical overlap that happens in a city of millions, but coincidences lose their innocence when they stack up. Friends were interviewed, ex-partners tracked down, each conversation peeling back another layer of a man who drifted through lives without anchoring to any of them. One ex-girlfriend mentioned his temper, how quickly he could turn cold, how he hated the subway, hated crowds, hated being ignored. Still, nothing placed Lena directly in his hands. No body, no weapon, no confession. The case hovered in that frustrating space between suspicion and proof, where cold cases so often die again. Prosecutors warned against moving too fast, against building a story that couldn't survive a courtroom. The city watched from a distance, headlines cautious now, phrases like case reopened, and possible breakthrough replacing certainty. For Lena's family, hope returned like a bruise, tender and painful, a reminder of everything they'd lost and everything they might lose again. Detectives walked the station once more, standing where Lena had stood, listening to the trains roar past, imagining the platform as it was that night, less renovated, more shadowed. They noticed things no one had documented before. A maintenance door tucked behind an advertisement, a narrow stairwell leading to service corridors few commuters ever see. Blueprints revealed blind spots in camera coverage, pockets of darkness that moved with the flicker of aging lights. It wasn't hard to imagine someone being pulled through one of those doors, hidden from view in the seconds between trains. But imagination is not evidence, and cold cases punish those who confuse the two. Every theory had to survive the grind of fact-checking, every assumption challenged by someone whose job was to say no. Detectives argued late into the night, voices low, tempers fraying, the pressure of years pressing down on each decision. This wasn't just about solving a case. It was about reopening old wounds, about risking public trust, about admitting that the city might have failed someone and then forgotten. Media attention intensified as whispers of an arrest leaked, reporters circling the station again, cameras pointed at entrances that had become symbols of unresolved fear. Commuters stopped to listen, to remember, to ask themselves how many times they'd stood on a platform without really seeing what was happening around them. The subway, once a backdrop to daily life, felt charged, its tunnels carrying not just trains but secrets, regrets, and the possibility that the truth had been moving beneath the city all along. The suspect remained in custody on unrelated charges, a legal limbo that frustrated everyone involved. Interrogations continued, questions circling the same night, the same station, the same missing woman. Sometimes he grew defensive, sometimes oddly reflective, as if weighing how much the past still mattered. At one point, he asked what had happened to the girl, his tone almost curious, and the room went quiet, the question hanging there like a challenge. Detectives exchanged glances, wondering if this was a slip or just another layer of performance. As weeks passed, new information trickled in, small but significant. A former transit employee came forward, saying he'd been pressured years ago to downplay the power issue, to mark it as routine and move on. An anonymous tip suggested the suspect had boasted once, drunkenly, about knowing how to disappear someone in the subway. None of it was clean. None of it was enough. But together it painted a picture that refused to fade, a sense that the city had brushed past the truth and kept walking. For Lena's mother, the reopening of the case was both vindication and torment. She returned to the station again, standing beneath the same lights, imagining her daughter's last moments, her fear, her confusion. She spoke to the press with measured anger, reminding them that behind every cold case headline is a family frozen in time, waiting for an ending that never comes. The word arrest hovered just out of reach, a promise the city seemed hesitant to keep. And still, the most important question remained unanswered. What happened in those missing minutes, in that slice of darkness between trains, between camera frames, between assumptions? The city leaned forward, listening for an answer, even as investigators warned that reopening a cold case doesn't guarantee resolution, only the chance to ask better questions. Somewhere in the tunnels, the echo of that unanswered scream seemed to linger, a reminder that the past is never as buried as we think, and that sometimes the most dangerous secrets are the ones we ride past every day without ever seeing. Pressure changed the shape of the investigation, tightening timelines, sharpening voices, forcing decisions that had been deferred for years under the excuse of uncertainty. The reopened New York subway cold case was no longer a dusty file. It was a living thing again, moving through precincts and press rooms, pulling people back into a night they tried to forget. Detectives split their focus, some digging deeper into the suspect's past, others widening the lens, questioning whether the city had missed more than one shadow that night. They started with the spaces no one thinks about, the in-between places beneath the city where doors lead to corridors without signs, where access is controlled more by habit than by locks. Maintenance schedules were reviewed line by line. Keys were tracked. Old access cards resurfaced, their serial numbers traced to employees long gone. It became clear that the subway is not just trains and platforms, but a maze of backstage routes, known intimately by those who keep it running and invisible to almost everyone else. In that maze, opportunity hides comfortably. The suspect's employment history drew renewed scrutiny. Years earlier, he'd worked briefly for a contractor tied to transit maintenance, a job that ended quietly, without incident, without records detailed enough to answer the questions now being asked. He would have known the rhythms of stations, the quiet hours, the moments when systems reset and attention drifts. He would have known which doors were alarmed and which were ignored. This wasn't proof, but it was context, and context in a cold case can be as powerful as evidence when it reframes everything you thought you understood. Investigators returned to the footage again, this time with technicians who specialized in recovering detail from degraded video. Frames were isolated, enhanced, slowed to a crawl. In one sequence, barely visible, a shape appears behind Lena just before the power flicker, a blur that could be a person or could be nothing at all. Arguments broke out over that blur. Careers hanging on interpretations of pixels and shadows. Was that a coat sleeve? A bag? A trick of the light? The footage refused to answer, offering only ambiguity, the cruelest gift a cold case can give. Outside the precinct, the city reacted in waves. Some commuters shrugged, hardened by years of headlines, while others felt a chill creeping into routines they'd always taken for granted. Late-night platforms felt lonelier now, every footstep amplified, every stranger a question mark. Advocacy groups demanded better lighting, better cameras, better answers. The subway authority issued statements heavy on reassurance and light on specifics, careful not to admit what everyone was starting to suspect, that the system designed to move millions had once failed to protect one person, and might have helped erase her instead. Inside the interrogation room, time played differently. The suspect was questioned again, confronted with timelines, with employment records, with the suggestion that he knew the station better than he claimed. He listened, arms folded, jaw tight, correcting small details, seizing on minor errors as if they proved his innocence. When detectives mentioned the power outage, his eyes flicked up, just for a second, a reaction so subtle it could have been missed if everyone in the room hadn't been waiting for it. He said outages happened all the time. He said anyone who rode the subway knew that. A search warrant followed, limited but significant, covering a storage unit rented under a variation of his name years earlier and forgotten until now. Inside, investigators found little of immediate value, just boxes of personal junk, tools, old clothing. But tucked beneath it all was a transit map from the year Lena vanished, creased and marked in pen, certain stations circled, certain corridors traced like routes on a battlefield. The suspect dismissed it as coincidence, a relic from his old job, but to detectives it felt like a window into intent, into preparation, into a mind that planned instead of panicked. Forensics tested everything they could, chasing traces that time had worked hard to erase. Fibers were compared, dust analyzed, handwriting examined. Progress came slowly, unevenly, punctuated by long stretches of waiting that stretched nerves thin. Prosecutors hovered at the edges, reminding everyone that suspicion doesn't survive cross-examination, that juries demand clarity in cases already blurred by years of delay. The word arrest remained radioactive, powerful and dangerous, capable of collapsing the entire effort if used too soon. The case widened again when another witness emerged, a former night shift cleaner who had worked that station years ago and had since moved out of state. He remembered a man arguing with a young woman near a maintenance door, remembered the lights flickering, remembered thinking it was none of his business. He'd said nothing at the time, he explained, because nothing bad ever happened on his shift, until it did, and by then it felt too late. His description of the man wasn't perfect, filtered through years of guilt and distance, but it echoed others, enough to make the room go quiet. That quiet didn't last. Defense attorneys pushed back hard as rumors of an impending arrest grew louder. They questioned the reliability of decades-old memories, the integrity of evidence stored and handled by too many hands. They painted a picture of a desperate department chasing closure instead of truth, of a city eager for a villain to plug the hole left by uncertainty. Every move investigators made was scrutinized now, not just by the media, but by the knowledge that any misstep would be amplified, weaponized, used to bury the case all over again. Lena's name surged back into public consciousness, no longer just a missing woman but a symbol of unresolved fear. Podcasts dissected the timeline. Comment sections filled with theories, some thoughtful, some reckless, all fueled by the same hunger for answers. Her family tried to stay out of the noise, focusing on meetings with detectives, on the careful language of updates that promise progress without guaranteeing justice. Hope became something they managed carefully, afraid that too much of it would make the next disappointment unbearable. As investigators closed in, the city felt poised on the edge of something, a collective intake of breath. Either the case would finally break, or it would fracture under the weight of its own history, collapsing back into silence. The subway kept running through it all, trains roaring through stations heavy with meaning, carrying people past places where time had folded in on itself. Somewhere in that motion, in the echo of footsteps and the rush of air, the truth waited, unchanged by years, indifferent to headlines, ready or not to be found. The arrest came at dawn, not with sirens screaming through the streets, but with the dull weight of inevitability, the kind that settles in after every argument has been had and every risk counted twice. When detectives knocked on the suspect's door, the city was just beginning to wake, subway entrances breathing out their first waves of commuters, unaware that beneath their feet, a long silent case had finally crossed a line. He didn't resist. He didn't ask why. He simply stared at the badges, eyes unreadable, as if this moment had always been waiting for him somewhere down the track. Word spread fast, faster than officials wanted, faster than statements could be drafted. New York subway cold case reopened, surprise arrest rocks the city. The headline tore through phones and screens, jolting a public that had learned to file Lena Morales away as a tragedy without an ending. Cameras clustered outside the precinct. Neighbors whispered. Commuters slowed on platforms, glancing around as if the past might still be standing beside them. For a brief moment, the city felt unsteady, like a train braking too hard. Inside the interrogation room, the atmosphere was different now, charged with consequence. The suspect sat across from detectives, hands clasped, posture rigid. The questions came again, but this time they carried the gravity of arrest, the knowledge that every word could tip the balance. He denied everything with the same calm precision, insisting the evidence was circumstantial, the witnesses mistaken, the timing unlucky. He spoke of his life, his jobs, his isolation, as if constructing a narrative sturdy enough to stand against years of suspicion. When asked directly about Lena, his voice didn't change. He said he'd never met her. He said he had nothing to do with her disappearance. The room listened not for what he said but for what he didn't. Prosecutors moved quickly, laying out a case built on accumulation rather than certainty. They talked about opportunity, about access, about the convergence of small details that together pointed in one direction. They showed the transit map, the power outage, the witness statements, the partial fingerprint match that had started it all. Defense attorneys responded just as fast, attacking each element with surgical precision. They called the evidence thin, the memories unreliable, the investigation tainted by time and pressure. This, they argued, was not justice, but desperation dressed up as progress. As legal teams sparred, detectives kept digging, aware that an arrest doesn't end a cold case. It only sharpens it. They revisited storage rooms, re-examined old logs, searched for anything they might have missed in their rush to move forward. In the process, they uncovered an uncomfortable truth. Records had been lost, overwritten, mishandled in the years after Lena vanished. Maintenance footage erased by routine data purges. Incident reports filed incorrectly. A system designed for efficiency had quietly erased parts of its own memory, and now those gaps were on trial. Public reaction split along familiar lines. Some hailed the arrest as long overdue justice, proof that persistence matters, that the city doesn't forget it's missing. Others were skeptical, wary of celebrating too soon, mindful of past cases where premature arrests collapsed under scrutiny. On social media, theories hardened into convictions, arguments flared, and Lena's name became a rallying cry and a battleground all at once. Through it all, her family stayed mostly silent, releasing a single statement asking for patience, for respect, for the truth to matter more than headlines. The subway authority found itself under a harsh spotlight. Questions about safety, surveillance, and accountability flooded in. Officials emphasized upgrades made since Lena's disappearance: new cameras, brighter lighting, better training. Critics countered that none of it changed what had already happened, that no improvement could erase the feeling that the system had once swallowed a person whole. Writers shared stories of close calls, of moments when they'd felt invisible, of platforms that still felt too dark, too quiet, too easy to disappear from. Behind closed doors, doubts crept in. Some investigators worried they'd built a narrative too clean, too dependent on coincidence aligning just so. Others believed the case was stronger than it looked, that years of fragments had finally coalesced into something solid. Late-night meetings stretched on, voices low, the weight of responsibility heavy. An arrest without a conviction would be worse than no arrest at all, a reopening that led only to another kind of silence. Then came a development no one had expected. During a routine review of evidence tied to the suspect's unrelated charges, analysts found a digital footprint that hadn't been there before, a device backup recovered from a cloud service that hadn't existed at the time of Lena's disappearance. Buried deep in its data was a file timestamp just weeks after she vanished, a series of photographs taken in low light, blurred and indistinct, but unmistakably underground. A tiled wall, a maintenance corridor, a woman's shoe scuffed and familiar, matching the brand Lena was known to wear. The images were never shared, never posted, just saved and forgotten, until technology caught up with memory. The defense moved to suppress the evidence immediately, arguing chain of custody issues, authenticity concerns, the possibility of misinterpretation. Prosecutors saw something else entirely: a bridge across the years, a piece of the night that had finally surfaced. For Lena's family, the discovery was devastating and clarifying all at once, a confirmation that something terrible had happened, even if the full shape of it remained hidden. As the case barreled toward a preliminary hearing, the city held its breath. The subway stations remained the same, but they felt different now, charged with the knowledge that the past was no longer content to stay buried. Trains roared through tunnels lined with secrets, carrying millions forward while one story threatened to pull them back. Whether the arrest would stand, whether the evidence would hold, whether justice would finally take a form the city could recognize, remained uncertain. What was certain was this: the cold case was no longer cold, and whatever truth lay at its center was beginning to surface, one uneasy detail at a time. The courtroom became the new platform, a place where everyone waited for something to arrive, for a truth delayed so long it felt unreal once it finally began to move. On the morning of the preliminary hearing, the city pressed close, reporters lining the steps, cameras trained on doors that might open at any second. Inside, the air was tight, every sound amplified: the scrape of chairs, the low murmur of voices, the hum of a system preparing to judge its own past. This was no longer just a New York subway cold case. It was a test of memory, patience, and whether time itself could be cross-examined. Prosecutors laid out their argument with careful restraint, knowing excess would be punished. They spoke of patterns of access, of the convergence of small stubborn facts that refused to scatter no matter how many years passed. They introduced the transit map, the partial fingerprint, the witnesses who had finally found their voices, the power outage that no longer looked accidental when placed beside everything else. They framed the photographs as a turning point, not definitive proof, but a glimpse into a hidden corridor of the night Lena vanished. The defense listened, impassive, waiting for their moment to dismantle each piece. When it came, they did not disappoint. They attacked the foundation, not the details, arguing that the entire case rested on inference and hindsight. They questioned the reliability of witnesses whose memories had been shaped by headlines and guilt. They cast doubt on digital evidence discovered years later through technologies that didn't exist at the time, warning of false certainty born from modern tools applied to old ghosts. They reminded the court that there was still no body, no clear cause, no moment that could be pointed to and named with confidence. Suspicion, they argued, is not the same as truth. The judge listened, expression unreadable, weighing not just the arguments but the consequences of letting the case proceed. To move forward was to accept uncertainty, to invite a trial built on fragments and faith. To stop it here was to tell a family and a city that some questions are simply too old to answer. Outside, the crowd waited, phones buzzing with updates, commentators speculating in real time about outcomes that would ripple far beyond one courtroom. When the decision came, it landed with a muted thud rather than a bang. The case would proceed. Not because it was airtight, but because there was enough, just enough, to warrant a deeper reckoning. The words echoed through the room, setting off a chain reaction of relief, dread, and renewed scrutiny. The suspect was led away, face still unreadable, while Lena's family sat motionless, absorbing what this meant and what it did not. This was not justice yet. This was permission to keep asking. As the trial date loomed, investigators worked under a microscope. Every note, every piece of evidence, every decision made years ago was re-examined, aware that defense teams would exploit the smallest inconsistency. Old officers were called back in, asked to account for choices made under pressure, for shortcuts taken in a system built on speed. Some bristled. Some apologized. A few admitted they'd moved on too quickly, that the city's constant demand for the next case had pulled attention away before Lena's had truly been understood. The photographs became the focal point, their origin dissected in painstaking detail. Experts testified about metadata, about storage systems, about how files can persist unseen until something triggers their resurfacing. Skeptics countered with scenarios of mislabeling, of coincidence, of images that could belong to anyone. The shoe, scuffed and half seen, hovered at the center of debate, a symbol onto which everyone projected certainty or doubt. It looked like Lena's. It might not have been. In a cold case, even objects seem reluctant to commit. Public interest intensified, then fractured. Some clung to the arrest as a long-awaited answer, a narrative that restored order to chaos. Others grew uneasy, sensing the fragility of the case, the risk of turning suspicion into spectacle. Podcasts updated daily, panels argued late into the night, and the subway itself became a character in the story. Its stations photographed, its history parsed, its failures debated. Riders shared glances on platforms, the ordinary made strange by the knowledge that something unresolved had once unfolded right where they stood. Behind the scenes, a new threat emerged, quieter but persistent. Financial records hinted at unexplained cash deposits in the suspect's past, small amounts, irregular, easy to dismiss individually but curious in their pattern. Detectives traced them back, finding links to pawn shops, to items sold and resold without clear origin. None could be definitively tied to Lena, but the timing raised questions. Where had these things come from? Why then? The answers, if they existed, were buried beneath layers of transactions designed to blur rather than reveal. The suspect, meanwhile, grew more erratic in custody. Requests for meetings increased. Complaints multiplied. At times he seemed eager to talk, hinting at knowledge without offering substance, testing boundaries. At other moments he retreated into silence, lawyer present, eyes fixed on the table. Interrogators sensed a shift, not toward confession, but toward something else, a desire to control the narrative even if he couldn't escape it. He asked about the photographs again. He asked what people were saying. He asked if the city hated him yet. For Lena's family, the days blurred together, consumed by hearings, interviews, and the exhausting work of staying present. They revisited memories they tried to protect, answering questions about her habits, her fears, her routines. Each detail felt like both evidence and violation, her life reduced to data points in a fight she could no longer join. And yet, there was resolve there too, a refusal to let the process hollow out what remained of her story. As summer edged toward fall, the case settled into a tense rhythm, progress measured not in breakthroughs but in survival. Each motion argued, each ruling handed down, kept the story alive, suspended between resolution and collapse. The subway ran on, indifferent, trains slicing through tunnels that had learned to keep their secrets. Somewhere in that motion, between stops and announcements, the city waited to see if this reopening would finally lead somewhere, or if it would become another chapter in the long history of questions that echo underground, unanswered, every time the doors close and the train pulls away. The trial began without spectacle, stripped of the cinematic excess people had imagined during years of waiting, and that absence made it more unsettling, not less. No sudden revelations, no dramatic confessions, just the steady, methodical peeling back of a night that refused to resolve itself. Jurors filed in, ordinary faces asked to carry the weight of an extraordinary absence, while the city hovered outside, listening through updates and fragments, trying to feel where this was going. Prosecutors opened with restraint, reminding the court that this was a case about accumulation, not a single smoking gun. They walked the jury through the station as it existed years ago. Its lighting weaker, its blind spots wider, its security a patchwork of intention and neglect. They described Lena's routines, her reliability, the improbability of her simply disappearing by choice. They spoke of opportunity, of access, of a suspect whose life intersected with the subway in ways that were too convenient to ignore. Each point landed softly, deliberately, building a structure that depended on patience to be understood. The defense countered by pulling that structure apart piece by piece. They emphasized the danger of hindsight, of stitching meaning onto coincidences after the fact. They questioned why, if the suspect was capable of such a precise act, there was no clearer trace left behind. They asked jurors to consider how much had changed in the years since Lena vanished, how memories degrade, how systems fail, how pressure can turn uncertainty into conviction. Their message was simple and persistent. Doubt is not a flaw in justice, it is its foundation. Witnesses took the stand, each carrying a version of the past shaped by time and consequence. The night shift cleaner spoke quietly, his voice breaking as he described the argument he'd overheard and the choice to walk away. The maintenance worker explained the power fluctuation, his earlier dismissal of it, the way management had urged him to mark it routine and move on. Experts debated the fingerprint match, its partial nature, its limitations. Each testimony added texture but rarely clarity, a mosaic whose image shifted depending on where you stood. When the photographs were introduced, the room changed. The images were shown briefly, carefully, their contents described more than displayed, the judge mindful of their impact. Blurred tiles, a narrow corridor, a shoe at the edge of the frame half seen, half recognized. Prosecutors argued that these were souvenirs, evidence of presence in a place most people never see. The defense argued they were meaningless without context, artifacts that could belong to anyone, anywhere underground. The jury watched, listened, tried to measure the distance between suggestion and proof. Outside the courtroom, the city debated itself. Some saw the trial as overdue accountability, a reckoning not just for one man but for a system that had allowed a person to vanish in plain sight. Others worried aloud about precedent, about what happens when pressure to resolve a cold case bends standards meant to protect everyone. The subway authority released more data, more timelines, attempting transparency while guarding against liability. Every station announcement, every delay, felt heavier now, loaded with implication. As the days stretched on, fatigue set in. Jurors took notes, then stared at them, trying to reconcile facts that refused to line up cleanly. Detectives sat in the gallery, watching their work refracted through legal argument, aware that once a case enters this space, it no longer belongs to those who built it. The suspect remained composed, occasionally whispering to his attorney, occasionally scanning the room as if searching for something he'd misplaced years ago. Midway through the trial, a surprise witness took the stand, a former acquaintance of the suspect who had surfaced only recently, motivated, he said, by guilt and the weight of the coverage. He described a conversation years ago, a late-night exchange fueled by alcohol, in which the suspect had bragged about knowing the subway's dead zones, places cameras couldn't see, places sound didn't carry. The defense attacked his credibility immediately, highlighting inconsistencies, motives, the ease with which stories grow sharper over time. Still, the words hung in the air, adding another layer of unease. The judge reminded the jury repeatedly that this was not a referendum on the subway, nor a proxy for every unresolved case the city carried. It was about one night, one person, one set of decisions. But the boundaries blurred anyway. Lena's absence loomed over everything, a negative space shaping the narrative more powerfully than any physical evidence could. Her family watched from the front row, expressions controlled, absorbing each detail as if it were both revelation and repetition. As closing arguments approached, the tension shifted from discovery to reckoning. Prosecutors urged jurors to look at the whole picture, to see how each fragment reinforced the others, how chance gave way to pattern. The defense urged restraint, warning against filling gaps with fear or sympathy, against mistaking plausibility for certainty. They asked a question that landed hard. If this case were presented without headlines, without years of longing for closure, would it still convince you? Deliberations began behind closed doors, time stretching again, that familiar waiting returning in a new form. Outside, cameras stayed trained on the courthouse steps. Analysts speculated, families paced, and the subway continued its relentless schedule, trains arriving and departing with mechanical indifference. Somewhere beneath that movement, the truth waited to be named or denied, unchanged by argument, untouched by opinion. For the city, for Lena's family, for everyone who had followed the story from its first shocking moments, this was the threshold. Whatever came next would define the case not just as reopened, but as resolved or forever contested. The jurors weighed doubt against responsibility, absence against inference, knowing that their decision would echo far beyond the room, down into tunnels where questions still lingered, riding the rails waiting for an answer that might finally stick. Deliberation stretched into days, time folding in on itself the way it always does when answers refuse to surface. Inside the jury room, the case was reduced to paper, photographs, transcripts, and the heavy silence between arguments. Jurors spoke in turns, then over one another, then not at all, circling the same points like trains looping a line without a terminal. Some saw pattern where others saw coincidence. Some felt the weight of years pressing toward a verdict. Others felt the danger of mistaking pressure for proof. Outside, the city waited, checking phones, refreshing feeds, measuring the hours by speculation. When the jury returned, the courtroom filled with a tense stillness, the kind that drains sound from the air. The verdict was not the clean resolution anyone had imagined. Guilty on one count, not guilty on another. Hung on the charge that mattered most. The words landed unevenly, confusion rippling through the room. The suspect showed no visible reaction, only a slight tightening of his jaw. Lena's family absorbed the outcome in silence, relief and devastation colliding in a way that defied expression. Justice, it turned out, could be partial, fragmented, unfinished. The judge addressed the room with measured gravity, explaining the implications, the paths forward. A mistrial on the central charge meant decisions ahead. Retry, renegotiate, or release. Prosecutors requested time. Defense attorneys signaled readiness for whatever came next. Outside, headlines scrambled to capture the complexity in a language built for certainty. Mixed verdict in subway cold case trial. No closure yet. The city struggled to understand what had been decided and what remained unresolved. In the days that followed, the story shifted again. Public opinion fractured further, debates sharpening rather than settling. Some saw the partial convictions as validation, proof that the case was never empty. Others saw the hung jury as confirmation of doubt, evidence that the foundation was too unstable to support the weight placed upon it. The suspect was returned to custody on the counts that held, his future now a question mark shaped by appeals and sentencing guidelines. Lena's name remained at the center, her absence still the loudest fact in the room. Behind the scenes, prosecutors faced a reckoning of their own. To retry the unresolved charge would mean reopening wounds, reassembling evidence, asking witnesses to relive a night already stretched thin by time. To let it go would mean accepting that the most important question might never be answered in a courtroom. Meetings stretched late, voices low, decisions weighed against political pressure, public expectation, and the quiet insistence of a family that had already waited too long. Detectives returned to the file with a different kind of urgency now. No longer chasing arrest but clarity. Freed from the immediate constraints of trial, they re-examined threads that had been sidelined, looking for leverage that might tip the balance if the case moved forward again. One detail resurfaced with renewed significance. A service corridor renovation that had taken place months after Lena vanished, walls torn out, layouts changed, traces erased in the name of progress. Construction records showed discrepancies, missing sign-offs, rushed approvals. It raised a question no one liked asking. Had the subway itself, in trying to modernize, buried something it shouldn't have? Requests were filed. Old contractors were contacted. Retired officials were interviewed. Some cooperated willingly, eager to unburden themselves of lingering doubt. Others were defensive, wary of blame. The picture that emerged was messy, bureaucratic, unsettling. Decisions made quickly, documentation treated as formality, the assumption that nothing important had been lost. In a city always racing forward, the past is often paved over without a second thought. Media attention flared again as these revelations leaked, reframing the case not just as a crime, but as a failure of systems stacked atop one another. The subway authority pushed back, emphasizing that no physical evidence had ever been confirmed in those corridors, that renovations were routine, necessary, unrelated. Critics countered that routine is exactly how things disappear. The phrase institutional blind spot began appearing in commentary, a clinical term for something that felt deeply personal to those who had followed Lena's story. For Lena's family, the mixed verdict forced a difficult recalibration. They spoke publicly again, not with anger, but with resolve, reminding the city that partial answers were not enough. They called for continued investigation, for transparency, for the courage to keep looking even when the path forward was unclear. Their words cut through the noise, grounding the debate in the reality of loss, rather than the abstraction of law. The suspect, now convicted on lesser charges, filed motions through his attorneys, challenging evidence, procedure, intent. He maintained his innocence regarding Lena, insisting that the city was projecting its fear onto him. In interviews filtered through legal filings, he spoke of being made into a symbol, a stand-in for something larger. Whether that was deflection or truth depended entirely on where you stood, and that uncertainty refused to dissipate. As weeks passed, the possibility of a retrial loomed, then receded, then loomed again. Prosecutors weighed new information against the risk of another inconclusive outcome. Detectives continued to chase leads that grew colder by the day, aware that momentum once lost is hard to regain. The city's attention drifted, pulled toward newer crises, newer headlines, even as the case remained unresolved at its core. And yet something had changed. The reopening had shifted the ground, altered how the city saw itself and its underground arteries. Riders lingered a little longer at platforms, eyes scanning shadows. Transit policies were revisited, audits announced, cameras upgraded again. These changes could not rewrite the past, but they stood as acknowledgments, quiet admissions that what happened to Lena mattered, that it had forced the city to look at itself in a harsh light. The case settled into a strange afterlife, neither closed nor fully open, suspended in legal and emotional limbo. For some, the partial convictions were enough to sleep at night. For others, the unanswered question still screamed louder than any verdict. What happened in those missing minutes? What was lost beneath the city, and what might still be buried there? Deep underground, trains continued to arrive and depart, their schedules indifferent to human uncertainty. The tunnels carried sound, air, and memory, holding on to secrets even as the world above debated their meaning. The cold case had been warmed, stirred, exposed, but it had not yielded its final truth. And in that unresolved space, the city learned something uncomfortable, that even when justice moves forward, it does not always arrive at the destination we're waiting for. Night returned to the subway with a different weight after the verdict, heavier somehow, as if the tunnels themselves had been listening and were disappointed by what they heard. The case was no longer racing forward, no longer frozen in the past. It was stuck in between, suspended in a place New York understands all too well. The mixed verdict settled into public consciousness slowly, confusion replacing the brief certainty that comes with an arrest. People asked the same question in different ways. Was this justice or just motion without a rival? Inside the courthouse, legal language took over, replacing emotion with procedure. Appeals were filed. Deadlines were set. Calendars filled with dates that felt abstract compared to the years already lost. The suspect remained behind bars on the lesser convictions, a technical outcome that satisfied no one completely. He had been punished, but not for what the city cared about most. Not for Lena. That absence loomed over every document, every argument, like a name that couldn't be written into the sentence. Detectives returned to the station again, not for press, not for ceremony, but out of habit and frustration. They stood near the edge of the platform, feeling the wind rush up from the tunnel as trains approached, thinking about how sound bends underground, how screams dissolve into noise. One of them noticed a detail he'd walked past dozens of times before. A patched section of tile near the maintenance door, newer than the rest, its color slightly off. It meant nothing on its own. In a cold case, everything means nothing until suddenly it doesn't. That observation led back to the renovation records, the rushed work orders, the incomplete inspections. Contractors were called again, this time under oath, their memories jogged by diagrams and photographs. Some shrugged, genuinely unsure. Others hesitated, choosing words carefully. One admitted that the corridor behind that platform had been partially sealed years ago after water damage, Walls rebuilt quickly to keep trains running on schedule. No one had documented what had been removed before construction began. No one had been told to look for anything. The implication spread quietly through the investigative team, unsettling in its simplicity. If something had been there, evidence, belongings, even remains, it could have been taken out with the debris, discarded without ceremony, absorbed into the city's endless process of demolition and repair. It was not a theory anyone wanted to voice too loudly. It pointed not just to a crime, but to an erasure carried out unintentionally by a system that values continuity over reflection. When word of this possibility reached the media, it reignited public anger in a new direction. The narrative shifted again from suspect-focused to system-focused. Commentators asked whether the truth had been destroyed not by malice, but by indifference. The subway authority pushed back hard, emphasizing the lack of physical proof, the danger of speculation. But the idea had already taken root, feeding into a deeper unease about how cities handle their pasts, especially the parts that slow them down. Lena's family was briefed privately, the information delivered carefully, without drama. The reaction was not shock but exhaustion. They had lived with uncertainty for so long that this new version of it felt almost familiar. Her mother asked one question quietly that cut through the room. If that's true, does it mean we'll never know for sure? No one answered immediately. In that silence, the limits of investigation became painfully clear. Meanwhile, the suspect watched all of this from a distance, updates filtered through attorneys and headlines. He filed additional motions, arguing that the mixed verdict and emerging doubts proved the case against him was fundamentally flawed. In letters read by the court, he positioned himself as collateral damage in a story larger than any one person, a man caught between a city's guilt and its need for closure. Whether that was self-awareness or manipulation was impossible to say. What mattered was that the case was slipping further from clean resolution. Public attention began to thin, as it always does. New stories crowded feeds. New scandals replaced old ones. But for those closest to the case, the work continued in quieter ways. Detectives interviewed sanitation supervisors, landfill managers, anyone who might shed light on where debris from that renovation had gone. Records were incomplete, archived, sometimes missing entirely. The trail led outward, diffusing rather than narrowing, a reminder that once evidence leaves the scene, it rarely comes back intact. The subway itself seemed unchanged, but riders noticed small differences born of heightened awareness. Cameras blinked more brightly. Signs warned against trespassing in service areas. Announcements emphasized safety late at night. These gestures felt both necessary and inadequate, acknowledgments of a wound without the ability to heal it. People still stood on platforms alone. Trains still roared past. The fundamental vulnerability remained. As months passed, prosecutors made their decision. There would be no retrial on the hung charge. The odds were too uncertain, the evidence too fragile, the risk of another inconclusive outcome too high. The announcement was brief, careful, respectful. It landed like a quiet thud, final without feeling complete. The case would remain officially unresolved, its central question unanswered by the system designed to answer it. For Lena's family, that decision closed one door and left another permanently ajar. They spoke again, not accusing, not pleading, but stating a fact the city could not ignore. A woman had disappeared, and no verdict could change that. They called for continued review, for independent oversight, for remembrance rather than resolution. In doing so, they reframed the story, shifting it from a hunt for a culprit to a meditation on loss and accountability. The suspect was eventually sentenced on the counts that held, his future measured in years rather than absolutes. He left the courtroom without spectacle, without confession, without explanation. For some, that was proof enough. For others, it only deepened the unease, the sense that the truth had slipped through cracks no one had been watching closely enough. And so the New York subway cold case entered a new phase, not active, not dormant, but embedded. Embedded in policy changes, in late-night conversations, in the way people glance down platforms and imagine what might exist just beyond the light. Embedded in a city that prides itself on movement, on progress, on never stopping long enough to look back. Deep underground, trains continued their routes, carrying stories above them and secrets below. The tunnels held the echoes of a night that refused to resolve, of a scream swallowed by steel, of a woman who stepped onto a platform and never returned. The case had been reopened, argued, judged, and still, it remained what it had always been at its core. An unanswered question moving endlessly beneath a city that can't quite decide how to live with it. The city moved forward, but the subway itself seemed to remember. Each late-night platform carried a residue of the past, a faint pulse of a moment when a person vanished into the tunnels and the world above barely noticed until it was too late. The cold case had shifted shape from headline to courtroom, from arrest to partial verdict, and now into something subtler, an undercurrent that ran through the daily rhythm of New York, unnoticed by most but undeniable to those who had lived it. Trains clattered past, indifferent, their metal bodies carrying millions while the memory of one life threaded through every echo. Detectives continued to circle the case, not with the urgency of arrest, but with a quiet obsession that defied closure. They revisited logs, interviews, and photographs, searching for connections missed, moments overlooked, traces too faint to matter in a previous investigation. Each lead opened another smaller door. A witness who had moved away, a maintenance note half-written, a security camera log that contradicted an earlier report. Progress was slow, frustrating, but unavoidable. The city's layers of bureaucracy and neglect had hidden something worth uncovering, and they could not simply leave it buried. New technology offered possibilities once unimaginable. Forensic analysts examined old evidence using methods that didn't exist when Lena disappeared. Enhanced imaging, chemical residue analysis, digital reconstruction of degraded files. Tiny details became visible, fibers and stains previously ignored could now be mapped. Even with these tools, certainty remained elusive. The evidence suggested, implied, whispered, but never confirmed. Every discovery brought more questions than answers. Each solved puzzle exposing gaps that had been invisible before. Meanwhile, the public's attention ebbed and flowed, drawn to newer scandals, brighter stories, and away from the quiet tension of a trial that had ended without full closure. Yet the story persisted in subtle ways. Conversations on trains, comments on social media, personal recollections shared with neighbors. Lena's absence lingered in the collective consciousness, a ghost of the city's conscience. The case had become part of the urban fabric, shaping perception even as it refused to resolve. The suspect's life continued under the shadow of partial conviction. He navigated the legal system, appeals in motion, movements constrained but not fully defined. He remained a figure of debate, innocent in the eyes of some, guilty in the eyes of others. The truth about that night, the sequence of events in the tunnels, remained his alone. His denial, steadfast and controlled, became another piece of the city's puzzle, an enduring question mark suspended in the daily hum of urban life. For Lena's family, the passage of time did not dull the pain. They lived in the tension between remembrance and the public spectacle of a trial, carrying memories and photographs, stories of routines and habits that prosecutors and detectives had dissected, transformed into evidence. They found solace in small actions, letters to officials, meetings with investigators, advocacy for safety improvements, but each action also reminded them of absence, of the partial justice that could never fully heal the wound. The subway authority implemented changes, both visible and hidden. Cameras were upgraded, access points monitored, protocols revised. For commuters, the changes were subtle, barely noticeable amid the roar of steel and the rhythm of stops. Yet for those who understood, the upgrades were a silent acknowledgement, a concession that the system had once failed and that vigilance could not end with an arrest. The tunnels themselves seemed to shift slightly under the weight of this awareness, corridors that had once been ignored now mapped and checked, their emptiness no longer assumed safe. Investigators discovered anomalies in old reports that hinted at careless assumptions. Logs marked as complete without verification, maintenance notes filed late, contradictions in the accounts of personnel who had moved on. These inconsistencies suggested the possibility that the truth might have been obscured not by malice, but by oversight, by the friction of a city moving faster than the individuals it is meant to protect. It raised uncomfortable questions about accountability and memory, about what is lost when attention drifts, even for a moment. The media, sensing both drama and ambiguity, continued to track every development. Podcasts recounted the story with dramatization, analysts dissected timelines, and commentary circulated online, focusing on both the unresolved aspects and the bureaucratic failings. Lena's disappearance became emblematic of the difficulty of uncovering truth in a metropolis that moves constantly, where shadows exist both above ground and below. The case was no longer just about one night. It was about the interplay between time, neglect, and memory in the heartbeat of a city. Amid all this, the trains ran, indifferent to human obsession. Doors opened and closed. Announcements echoed through tunnels. The air was filled with the rhythm of movement, of lives intersecting briefly, oblivious to the invisible scars left beneath their feet. And in that rhythm, the city itself seemed to pulse with unresolved tension, the unanswered question of a vanished life continuing to vibrate through steel, concrete, and the echo of footsteps. Detectives returned again to the platforms, observing patterns, noting behaviors, reviewing incidents that seemed trivial until placed in the broader context of the cold case. Minor reports, an unexplained presence, a misfiled key, a misplaced tool, became points of renewed interest. Every detail was scrutinized anew, with the awareness that time, while cruel, had also preserved fragments of truth that could not be destroyed. It was meticulous, exhausting work, a testimony to obsession and hope rather than certainty. And still, Lena's absence shaped everything. Each commuter, each worker, each official who had touched the case was marked by it, consciously or not. The cold case, though partially resolved in the eyes of law, remained open in the memory of the city, in the tunnels where light and shadow intersected, in the echo of the trains that could not carry away the questions, no matter how fast they moved. The unresolved truth lingered like a pulse beneath the city, unyielding, unavoidable, and eternal. Months bled into a year, and the cold case refused to fade, its presence felt in quiet moments. A subway car empty except for a lone rider, the sudden silence of a platform at night, a flicker of movement in a maintenance corridor that nobody expected to be used. Detectives returned again and again, following threads that seemed to stretch infinitely, consulting forensic teams who applied methods impossible in the 2000s, piecing together fragments of a night that refused to yield its secrets. Every new technique revealed something previously invisible, a fiber, a stain, a digital timestamp, but none provided the definitive truth. Each discovery teased, suggested, whispered, but never confirmed. Lena's family endured the slow torture of suspended closure. Every call from investigators, every legal filing, every media headline was a reminder that her disappearance was still unresolved, still alive in the machinery of law and bureaucracy. They attended public safety meetings, joined campaigns to improve surveillance in transit spaces, and quietly, persistently, asked questions no one wanted to answer fully. Each step was an act of remembrance, a defiance against a system that had failed them once. Meanwhile, the suspect's life unfolded under layers of constraint and speculation. He followed legal counsel, filed motions, and watched from custody as investigators continued to probe the city's underbelly. He remained enigmatic, stoic one moment, agitated the next, his denials unchanged, his behavior a constant challenge to those seeking certainty. His presence in the system was both a placeholder for culpability and a symbol of the ambiguity that hung over the case. The media, ever hungry, capitalized on each minor development. Articles highlighted technical breakthroughs, rumors of new leads, even internal disagreements among investigators. Podcasts dramatized the trial's proceedings, turning courtroom testimony into suspenseful narrative, emphasizing tension over fact. Social media debates raged over every possibility. Was the suspect guilty? Could the evidence hold? Investigators focused once again on the subway's physical spaces. Maintenance logs were cross-referenced with construction records, security footage reanalyzed frame by frame, and old blueprints scrutinized. Small inconsistencies became focal points. A missing screw in a stairwell handrail, a patch of wall painted over a different shade, a misplaced sign. Each anomaly hinted at oversight, negligence, or perhaps concealment. Patterns that had once seemed insignificant now hinted at a timeline, a sequence of actions that might finally be reconstructed with sufficient patience. At the same time, the Subway Authority launched a discreet internal audit. Their interest was dual: protect the institution and prevent another tragedy. Inspectors walked every platform and corridor, checking camera angles, accessibility, and maintenance protocols. Reports were filed, then revised, then filed again. The emphasis on thoroughness was meant to reassure the public, but it also underscored the city's awareness of its past failures. Even as the trains roared above and below, the organization that ran them recognized that memory and accountability could not be fully erased. The city itself seemed to shift subtly under the weight of the unresolved case. Commuters lingered longer at platforms, scanning shadowed corners, glancing at emergency exits, more aware than ever of their vulnerability. Subway employees spoke in hushed tones about the night Lena disappeared, the phrase becoming shorthand for caution, remembrance, and unease. Even those who never followed the trial in detail felt its residue, an invisible marker on routine spaces that were once taken for granted. Inside investigative offices, teams worked with almost obsessive repetition. Old interviews were reviewed alongside new testimony, timelines reconstructed using digital tools unavailable at the time of disappearance, and mundane objects re-examined. A discarded shoelace, a forgotten locker key, a fiber pulled from a maintenance cart. Each item, once considered irrelevant, was treated with renewed respect. The goal was not just to solve a crime, but to assert control over a fragment of chaos that had long been untamed. And still, Lena's absence defined the rhythm of investigation. Each minor lead was measured against her memory. Every procedural adjustment weighed for its capacity to honor her life, rather than just satisfy legal formality. Detectives grappled with their own limitations, knowing that even the sharpest reconstruction could not perfectly recapture the night, could not bring back what had been lost. Yet they pressed on, aware that persistence was the only form of justice that remained within their reach. Deep underground, trains continued their relentless schedule, unaware of human obsession. Platforms emptied and refilled, doors closed and opened, announcements echoed along corridors that still held shadows of that night. And through it all, the cold case lingered, a constant hum beneath the city, shaping perception, memory, and vigilance. The unresolved question persisted, threading through steel, concrete, and the rhythm of daily life, a reminder that some absences are too profound to ever be fully erased. The city moved, the trains moved, investigators and families moved, but the tunnels carried their own narrative, silent, unyielding, and eternal. In that subterranean pulse, Lena's story remained, not resolved, not forgotten, and perhaps never to be fully known, echoing in every passing train and every shadowed corridor. A reminder that a cold case is never truly closed until the city itself admits it has been. The passage of another year only deepened the sense of suspended time surrounding the cold case. Investigators had exhausted conventional leads, but the story refused to die. Every detail, no matter how small, was re-examined with a combination of frustration and devotion that seemed to define the rhythm of their work. Old photographs were enhanced, security logs reconstructed, eyewitness accounts compared against newer recollections, each piece contributing to a mosaic that never fully aligned. Every discovery revealed a new gap, a contradiction, a fragment of possibility. Lena's family remained vigilant. They attended hearings, consulted with investigators, and lobbied for continued oversight of transit operations. Their presence was both grounding and a quiet pressure on the system, a reminder that this disappearance had not been forgotten, that no verdict or partial conviction could substitute for the answers they sought. They were patient but insistent, moving through the bureaucratic machinery with determination, ensuring that the unresolved nature of the case remained alive in the consciousness of those who could act. The suspect's life had adapted to the new reality, framed by the partial convictions and ongoing scrutiny. He participated in legal motions, challenged procedural findings, and navigated his restricted existence with a composed intensity that made some question whether he was weary, calculating, or both. His denials persisted, yet each public statement, each filtered communication through attorneys, added another layer of ambiguity. In a case defined by absence and partial truths, every word carried disproportionate weight. Within the subway system itself, incremental changes were noticeable, though subtle. Cameras were repositioned, corridors assessed, and maintenance protocols updated. Employees became aware of a heightened scrutiny. Nothing was ignored. The changes were not only precautionary, they were acknowledgement, silent admissions that the infrastructure itself had failed to protect or observe. Even routine inspections now carried a weight previously unseen, a quiet tension accompanying the hum of the trains. The media, never far from the story, shifted from headlines of trial to analysis of oversight, management, and systemic failures. Podcasts dissected timelines minute by minute, public forums debated procedural fairness, and articles revisited the mixed verdict with renewed scrutiny. Lena's disappearance became emblematic not just of crime, but of institutional oversight, of how an individual's absence can ripple outward, exposing weaknesses, assumptions, and errors. Public fascination remained steady, a persistent hum beneath everyday life, fueled less by expectation of resolution and more by recognition of the unresolved. Detectives occasionally returned to the subway platforms, observing without interference. They traced the faint patterns of movement, noting how commuters interacted with spaces once tied to tragedy. Minor anomalies, doors left unlocked, a missing sign, misplaced equipment, were cataloged, cross-referenced, and scrutinized. Each observation, while mundane, was treated as a potential clue, a testament to the belief that even the smallest detail could shift the trajectory of understanding. Meanwhile, internal investigations into past management decisions revealed patterns of neglect and oversight. Old reports had been filed incompletely, critical observations dismissed as routine, and minor discrepancies ignored. Analysts began connecting the dots, understanding that systemic failure could be as consequential as individual action. The realization spread quietly among officials. Responsibility was not only personal but structural, embedded in the rhythm of a city that prizes speed over reflection. The city itself adjusted, subtly but persistently. Riders scanned shadows more attentively, maintenance crews followed updated protocols, and emergency procedures were reinforced. Yet, the cold case had woven itself into the urban fabric. Its presence could not be fully erased. Every platform, every tunnel, every fleeting shadow reminded the population that some absences are permanent, that the city itself can harbor secrets beyond immediate comprehension. Lena's absence became a lens through which ordinary moments were refracted. Trains arrived and departed, commuters moved, and life proceeded in its relentless pace. Yet beneath it all, the unresolved case pulsed like a low-frequency vibration, felt rather than seen. Conversations, gestures, glances, all were colored by the awareness that one person had vanished, and that no institution had fully accounted for her disappearance. And so the city continued to move, relentless, unaware yet subtly changed by what had occurred below. The cold case remained active in memory, in policy, in the very air of underground platforms and tunnels, a persistent reminder that time alone does not resolve absence. The trains carried their daily loads, the announcements echoed, and shadows lingered in corners where no eyes had ever observed, as though the city itself held its breath, waiting for an answer that might never come. Through it all, the investigative teams persisted, driven less by certainty than by duty. Every record, every file, every corridor was re-examined as though the very act of looking could summon the past into the present. And somewhere, beneath the city that never truly sleeps, Lena's story remained, unfinished, unresolved, a quiet pulse beneath the ceaseless motion of New York, demanding attention even when the world above tried to move on. The cold case settled into a rhythm of persistent tension, neither dormant nor fully active, like a shadow that refuses to recede. Investigators, detectives, and analysts returned again and again to old files, new leads, and overlooked details, understanding that time had not erased truth. It had only hidden it beneath layers of urban noise, bureaucratic indifference, and human forgetfulness. Every photograph, log, and fragment of testimony was a thread leading somewhere, though no one knew exactly where, and every revisit revealed another wrinkle in the timeline, another contradiction, another ghost of what had been. Lena's family carried the weight of that absence daily, their lives intertwined with memory and the quiet pressure of unresolved questions. They attended committee meetings, consulted experts, filed requests, and met with detectives. Their vigilance was a form of resistance, a refusal to let the city's indifference claim her memory. Yet the personal toll was immense. Anniversaries passed without ceremony, holidays were punctuated by reminders of loss, and the smallest triggers, a train passing at night, a flicker of light on a platform, rekindled pain in an unending loop. Their advocacy was both a shield against forgetting and a dagger into their own hearts. The suspect remained in custody on lesser convictions, a figure framed by ambiguity. He navigated appeals, court hearings, and limited freedoms, maintaining denials that only deepened the city's uncertainty. Every statement he made, every carefully worded legal filing, became a new layer of complexity. His presence, as much a symbol as a defendant, reminded the public that the cold case was as much about perception, interpretation, and human obsession as it was about law. The subway system itself became a character in the narrative, alive with memory and consequence. Platforms were inspected, corridors reassessed, and emergency protocols reinforced. Employees were trained to observe more carefully, security cameras repositioned, and maintenance logs updated with unprecedented scrutiny. Yet, for all these measures, the tunnels themselves retained a residue of the unresolved, echoes of absence, the whisper of a life that had slipped away. Trains ran as they always had, indifferent to human attention, yet they carried within their rhythm the ghost of what had occurred. Media coverage waxed and waned, shifting focus from procedural details to broader questions. Systemic negligence, the fragility of memory, the city's responsibility to those who vanish. Podcasts reconstructed timelines, analysts debated witness credibility, and commentators speculated endlessly about what had been missed, what could still be found. The story of Lena's disappearance transcended the individual, becoming a symbol of how cities, with all their movement and noise, often fail to account for absence, for the lives that vanish between the cracks of routine. Investigators discovered anomalies and inconsistencies that had previously been overlooked. A missing screw, a patch of wall repainted, a misfiled key. All became pieces of a puzzle that refused to be solved in a linear way. Patterns suggested sequences, potential locations, and forgotten corridors, but certainty remained out of reach. Each new lead was a possibility and a frustration, a reminder that even with technology and diligence, time has a way of eroding clarity. For the city, the cold case became part of its identity, a subtle but persistent pulse under the daily chaos. Commuters, unconsciously or not, moved with heightened awareness, noticing shadows, gaps in light, and spaces once ignored. Subway employees spoke in quiet tones about the night Lena disappeared, a shorthand for vigilance, memory, and caution. The case's presence shaped behaviors, conversations, and procedures, leaving a lasting imprint that no verdict could fully capture. And yet, for all the analysis, procedure, and vigilance, the absence remained. Lena's story was no longer just a criminal investigation. It was a meditation on loss, on imperfection, and on the city's inability to capture every truth. Trains arrived and departed, announcements echoed, shadows persisted, and the rhythm of life went on, indifferent yet subtly informed by a missing presence. The cold case lingered like a low-frequency vibration, felt rather than seen, shaping perception, memory, and attention with quiet insistence. In the deepest tunnels where light rarely penetrates and sound bends in strange ways, Lena's disappearance continued to resonate. The truth was suspended, waiting for discovery, reinterpretation, or acknowledgement. Investigators, families, and citizens alike carried its weight differently, yet all were connected by it. The city itself seemed to hold its breath, aware that some stories refuse finality, that some absences echo eternally. And so the New York subway cold case persisted, unresolved, unyielding, and impossible to ignore. It was more than a crime. It was a reminder that even in a city defined by motion, progress, and noise, some truths remain hidden, some losses permanent, and some questions, no matter how long pursued, refuse to be answered. Beneath the steel, beneath the concrete, and beneath the lives that carry on above, the pulse of that unresolved night continues, a silent, inexorable testament to absence, memory, and the city that must live with both. Under the city, the tunnels carried on as if nothing had happened, yet every echo of passing trains seemed weighted with memory. Investigators still returned, scanning shadows, tracing patterns, and revisiting old evidence with the persistence of obsession. They measured time not in days or weeks but in anomalies. A misaligned camera, a patch of wall repainted differently, a maintenance log that didn't match reality. Each detail became a heartbeat, pulsing beneath the city's daily rhythm, reminding them that the cold case was never truly closed. Lena's family lived with a constant tension, a duality of hope and despair. They attended meetings, consulted legal experts, and spoke at public forums, their words carrying both advocacy and grief. Each statement, each inquiry was a small act of resistance against forgetting. Every anniversary, every holiday, each subway ride was a reminder that her absence remained, shaping their lives in ways that no verdict or partial conviction could undo. The city might move on, but they could not, and perhaps they should not. The suspect's presence continued to haunt public perception. Convicted on lesser charges, his life was framed by uncertainty and scrutiny. Appeals, legal motions, and careful statements perpetuated ambiguity. His denials remained consistent, his demeanor inscrutable. For the city, he became less a person than a symbol, of doubt, of partial justice, and of the elusiveness of truth. Every word he spoke, every legal maneuver, fed the tension that refused to dissipate, leaving a lingering question. What did he know and what would never be known? The subway system itself had changed subtly, a silent acknowledgement of past failures. Cameras were repositioned, security protocols reinforced, and maintenance procedures tightened. Employees moved with heightened awareness, unconsciously carrying the memory of that night. Every platform, stairwell, and corridor bore traces of vigilance, yet the tunnels themselves seemed to retain an echo of absence, a whisper of a life lost and a truth unrevealed. Public attention remained fragmented, shifting between fascination and fatigue. Podcasts dramatized the timeline, analysts debated procedural flaws, and media outlets revisited the mixed verdict. Yet for all the coverage, the story's core remained untouchable. Lena's disappearance unresolved, unclaimed by justice. The city absorbed this tension quietly in subtle ways. Commuters lingering on platforms, shadows observed with caution, whispers of a night no one could fully reconstruct. Detectives continued their meticulous work, revisiting old leads with new technology, enhancing images, reconstructing timelines, and cross-referencing evidence. Each anomaly, an overlooked fiber, a misplaced key, an inconsistency in a witness statement, was cataloged, analyzed, and reanalyzed. They worked not in expectation of closure, but out of duty, understanding that persistence was the only form of justice still possible in a world where certainty had long fled. The system itself was implicated, its failures as haunting as any crime. Internal audits revealed negligence, oversights, and systemic gaps. Logs had been filed incompletely, maintenance reports left unchecked, and small anomalies ignored. The city's infrastructure, designed for speed and efficiency, had inadvertently buried pieces of the past, allowing a life to vanish beneath its relentless motion. Accountability became a question of structure as much as individual responsibility. And yet, the unresolved absence shaped the city in ways more profound than procedure. Shadows lengthened, corridors were noticed, and commuters' awareness subtly shifted. Subway employees whispered, "Remember the night Lena disappeared," a phrase that became shorthand for vigilance, memory, and the impossibility of closure. The tunnels carried these lessons silently, a pulse beneath daily life, guiding attention even as it could not restore what was lost. The trains continued their unbroken rhythm, indifferent yet symbolic, each car carrying thousands above the spaces where uncertainty lingered. Life moved forward, but the memory of that night persisted, threading through the city like an invisible marker. Every corner of the subway seemed to echo questions that had no answers, shadows that concealed fragments of a truth that refused to surface. In the deepest sections of the system, where light is scarce and sound bends strangely, Lena's story remained, unresolved, persistent, and haunting. Investigators, families, and the city itself carried her absence in different ways, connected by its silent weight. The cold case, though partially addressed in court, had entered an eternal state of suspension, a living reminder that some truths resist resolution. And so the New York subway cold case continued, beneath the ceaseless motion, beneath the steel and concrete, beneath the lives moving above unaware. An unresolved story, a question without answer, and a presence that refused to be forgotten. The city carries on, but in every shadowed corridor, every flicker of light, and every pulse of passing trains, the memory of that night and the echo of a vanished life remain silent, unyielding, and eternal. The city never sleeps, but beneath its restless surface, the subway carries secrets older than the morning rush. Even years later, shadows twist differently where Lena vanished. Investigators walk the corridors alone at night, headphones whispering reminders of forgotten details, fingers tracing walls, floors, and railings as if the steel could confess what memory refuses to give. Every echo is measured, every vibration analyzed. Yet the tunnels offer only whispers, hints, nothing concrete. Lena's absence has transformed from tragedy into a kind of presence. Her story is stitched into the routines of the city. The heightened gaze of commuters, the wary glance of workers in shadowed hallways, the subtle tension in the air of platforms that were once ordinary. Her memory lives in the things that were overlooked, in the mistakes never corrected, in the light that hits the walls just so and casts impossible shapes. She is everywhere, yet nowhere tangible. The suspect exists in this story like a specter of ambiguity. Convicted partially, denied fully, his life continues in the gray space between justice and doubt. Legal filings pile up, appeals march forward, and his denials echo as long as anyone listens. He is watched, followed, and measured, not only for what he did, but for what he might still know, and what he refuses to reveal. Every glance, every gesture, every carefully chosen word adds another layer of uncertainty. Technology grows sharper, methods more precise, yet the past remains slippery. Fiber, stain, digital timestamp. Each tiny clue surfaces, promising revelation but delivering only more questions. Detectives catalog, reconstruct, and speculate, understanding that sometimes investigation is less about answers than about keeping the pulse of memory alive. And memory, the city knows, is fragile, yet stubbornly persistent. Public attention wavers but never fully departs. Podcasts, articles, forums dissect each development, each minor anomaly, each procedural critique. The story becomes emblematic of the fragility of human oversight, of the imperfection of systems meant to protect, and of the enduring presence of absence. Commuters sense it even if unconsciously. Platforms feel different. Shadows feel different. The city hums with a tension few can name. Internal investigations highlight negligence, gaps in protocol, oversights that allowed the disappearance to remain unresolved. Yet acknowledging mistakes does not conjure truth. It only frames the scope of what has been lost. Layers of concrete and steel, bureaucratic inertia, and human error combine to create a labyrinth where certainty can never fully enter. The case has become as much about process as about crime, as much about what a city remembers as about what it forgets. And yet, for all the systems, all the protocols, all the scrutiny, the absence persists. It manifests in the smallest moments. A forgotten object, a misaligned door, a shadow that lingers too long. The city carries the cold case in subtle, unavoidable ways. Every subway ride, every platform, every train car is a reminder that some stories cannot be closed, some questions cannot be answered, and some lives cannot be reclaimed. In the deepest tunnels, Lena's story resonates. Not as evidence, not as a headline, but as a pulse beneath steel and concrete, beneath rushing feet and blinking lights. It is the rhythm of loss, the cadence of uncertainty, the vibration of an unanswered question. Investigators, families, and the city itself are bound by it. A shared recognition of absence that cannot be solved, only remembered. And so the New York subway cold case endures. It is unresolved, unyielding, and unforgotten. Every train that passes carries its weight. Every shadowed corner holds its echo. Every heartbeat above and below carries the memory of a night that no verdict, no procedure, no measure of justice can erase. The city moves on, but beneath its ceaseless motion, the cold case remains, silent, relentless, and eternal, waiting in the dark for the answers that may never come. The city breathes above, oblivious to the pulse beneath its feet. Every morning millions descend into the tunnels, unaware that the air carries memories older than their commute. Investigators still return at night, retracing footsteps, scanning walls, listening to echoes that bend strangely under steel arches. The cold case lives in the silence, in the faint vibration of passing trains, in the way shadows cling to corners where no light reaches. Each detail, however small, is a heartbeat, and each heartbeat whispers a fragment of what was lost. Lena's absence has become tangible in ways the law cannot measure. Every platform, every stairwell, every dimly lit passage seems to remember her. Her story lingers in the cautious glance of a commuter, the quiet murmur among workers, the subtle tension in the air. She exists in memory and in fear, in vigilance and in grief, shaping behavior, shaping perception, shaping the very pulse of the city's underground life. The suspect remains a figure of ambiguity, partially convicted, partially denied, a man whose denials and evasions have become as defining as the evidence against him. He navigates the legal system, constrained but active, a presence in courtrooms, filings, and appeals that keeps the tension alive. Every word he utters, every motion filed, every court appearance extends the shadow of doubt, ensuring the story refuses a simple ending. Investigators push the limits of technology, examining fibers, residues, timestamps, and digital reconstructions. Every discovery reveals new possibilities and new frustrations. The city's infrastructure, walls, floors, tunnels, has absorbed fragments of the past, but time has scattered truth into places almost impossible to retrieve. Persistence, patience, and obsession have become the only tools capable of navigating this labyrinth of loss and uncertainty. The media continues its subtle pressure, alternating between fascination and fatigue. Articles dissect procedures, podcasts dramatize timelines, online forums speculate endlessly. Public attention ebbs and flows, yet the story's echo persists. It is a lesson about absence, oversight, and the fragility of human systems. The city, in its perpetual motion, has absorbed this lesson into its rhythms, even as most of its residents remain unaware. Every shadowed corridor, every flickering light, every train car carries memory. Platforms are watched more carefully. Employees move with unspoken caution. Subtle changes, unnoticed by the majority, mark the city's acknowledgement that some absences leave permanent traces. The cold case has become part of the infrastructure itself, a silent reminder that loss is never fully erased. Internal investigations into past negligence continue to reveal uncomfortable truths. Reports were incomplete, protocols were ignored, and small anomalies dismissed. Human error and systemic failure intersected in ways that allowed a life to vanish. The realization has reshaped procedures, but it cannot reclaim what was lost. The absence, stubborn and persistent, defines spaces as much as steel and concrete do. Lena's story persists beneath it all, a pulse beneath the city, beneath every rush of air, beneath every passing train. It is felt more than seen, whispered more than spoken. Investigators, families, and the city itself are tied to it by memory and recognition. The cold case is not a record. It is a living presence shaping perception and action, reminding everyone that some truths are beyond capture. And so the New York subway cold case endures, stronger in absence than it ever was in action. It is unresolved, relentless, and impossible to forget. Every platform, every corridor, every shadowed corner carries the memory of that night. The city moves on above, yet beneath, the pulse of the unanswered question continues, silent, unyielding, eternal, waiting in the dark for answers that may never come. The tunnels keep their secret, the trains roar on, and the city hums with life, but somewhere below Lena's story waits. An unclaimed truth, a haunting presence, a reminder that some mysteries are never meant to be fully solved. The tunnels breathe a quiet, relentless rhythm, carrying trains, commuters, and the invisible weight of history. Yet beneath that motion, the cold case pulses like a heartbeat no one can silence. Investigators return once more, flashlights slicing through darkness, scanners buzzing, fingers tracing surfaces as if the walls themselves might confess the truth. Every corner, every crack, every shadowed alcove is a question waiting for an answer that may never come. Lena's absence is a presence now. It lingers in the anxious glance of commuters, in the whispered stories among employees, in the way shadows seem to move differently where she disappeared. Memory has woven itself into the steel and concrete. It persists in the rhythm of trains, the vibrations of the tracks, the faint echoes that bounce endlessly through the tunnels. She exists in these spaces more vividly than any photograph, any court document, any news headline could ever capture. The suspect navigates his constrained world, a figure partially convicted yet fully enigmatic. Each motion filed, each court appearance, each denial adds another layer of ambiguity. To the public, he is a symbol of unresolved justice. To investigators, he is a constant reminder that some truths are never fully revealed. Every word he speaks reverberates through the case, as calculated and elusive as the shadows in the subway. Technology grows sharper, analytical tools more precise, yet the past remains slippery. Fibers, residues, timestamps, and old video frames reveal fragments but never closure. Every discovery opens new doors, but those doors lead only to further questions, further shadows, further reminders that the city itself is complicit in hiding its secrets. Time has scattered the truth like dust in the tunnels, and the persistent ones can only gather pieces, never the whole. Public attention waxes and wanes, driven by headlines, podcasts, and online speculation, yet the story endures. Lena's disappearance is emblematic, a narrative of oversight, of fragility, of human error intersecting with systemic failure. The city hums with life above, oblivious yet below. Memory lingers in every steel beam, every flicker of light, every vibration that carries through the dark. The cold case has become part of the city itself, woven into the very fabric of movement, caution, and attention. Subtle changes ripple through the subway system. Cameras repositioned, corridors inspected, emergency protocols reinforced. Employees act with quiet vigilance, responding to invisible cues. The infrastructure remembers what humans may forget. The tunnels themselves seem to thrum with awareness, a silent record of absence, a testament to what the city cannot undo. Internal reviews reveal the uncomfortable truth. Oversight, negligence, and systemic failure allowed this disappearance to persist. Old reports were incomplete, minor anomalies ignored, mistakes compounded by haste and distraction. The realization reshapes procedures but cannot undo the past. The void left behind is stubborn, living, persistent, a presence that no amount of policy or technology can erase. And yet, the city continues to move, oblivious to the pulse beneath. Trains arrive and depart, doors open and close, announcements echo, footsteps reverberate. Above ground, life flows in chaos and routine, but below, Lena's story continues to resonate, a low, insistent vibration felt by those who seek it, noticed by those who remember. It is memory made tangible, presence made from absence. The cold case endures, a constant tension beneath motion and light. It is unresolved, relentless, a question without an answer. Platforms, corridors, shadows, and steel all carry its weight. The city moves on, yet beneath, the pulse of that unanswered night continues, unyielding, eternal, haunting, impossible to ignore. Somewhere in the depths, the truth waits, untouched by time, patient, silent. Investigators, families, and the city itself are bound to it, drawn by what cannot be claimed, by what cannot be recovered. And in every vibration of the tracks, in every flicker of subterranean light, in every whisper of passing air, the New York subway cold case reminds all who move above and below. Some mysteries endure forever, some absences cannot be reconciled, and some stories are destined to haunt long after the trains have gone.